I ran into you on purpose. Uh, we were at, or I was getting my horn fixed here in Hollywood, and I saw this beautiful horn that was laying there, and I said, "Oh wow!" To the repair guy Manny, who we both use. I said, "Whose is that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Boney James's horn. He's going to be here in about 5 minutes." And I just found a way to stick around. All the work had already been done, and I said, "Okay, let me just hang out for a bit." And you came in, you played. It was absolutely incredible. I was blown away as always. But just to hear you work with the horn, just amazing. I always like to start off while the reed is still fresh. If you want to play anything for us.
Sure. I don't think this is the horn that you were looking at. It was the soprano, but this is my tenor that I've had for a few years now. I got this from Manny. He had actually been saving it for a while, I think, till the prices got up to the astronomical area where they are now. And but I had played it a few times and thought, oh man, that's a really great horn. And so a couple of years ago, I bought it. It's a 71,000 Mark VI. So I think that's about 1957. My soprano is also in the same era, and it just feels like my horn. And this is maybe the third or fourth Mark VI I've had over the years, but this is by far the best one to me.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, all registers just absolutely amazing sound.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, let's get right into the gear. Um, I know that you've got a couple of more unique elements to your setups. Yeah, let's start with the tenor. What's the rest of the setup look like?
Well, I'm playing this Heidinga neck, which I was chatting with Candy Dulfer on the Smooth Jazz Cruise, which I co-host with Marcus Miller twice a year. Now it's coming up to that's three times a year. But it's an amazing event where tons of artists and fans go out and sail around the Caribbean. Anyway, she has a whole horn made by this guy, Friso Heidinga, who's a Dutch guy. And then I noticed that Melissa Aldana was playing it, and a couple of other people I really respect were playing this neck. So I wrote him on Instagram and he made me a neck and sent it to me. And I have tried different necks over the years and always just felt like, oh, it's different. But it was never like better than my Selmer neck. But this one, as soon as I put it on, I was like, oh my God, that really does something beautiful and positive in terms of just evenness of tone throughout the registers of the horn. It helped my pitch. Certain dead aspects of the horn were now coming alive, and I really loved it. So I've been playing that for a while. This is a relatively new mouthpiece. This is a vintage Auto Link. Also, I would guess in the 60s, early 60s era. I really love it. I'm playing a Roberto's Winds Reeds, 2.5 soft now these days. I've got this Le Freak tone bridge thing on here that sort of makes a bridge between your mouthpiece and your neck and bypasses the cork. It does something I dig. And I've also got one of these Klangbogen things on here, which also does something I like. Just I'm always looking for more timbre, more tone, more nuance in the sound, and these various things that I've done to the horn just make that work. I actually have a new ligature I've just discovered. This is called a Zach ligature. It's Italian, and it's just two chords, um, and a pretty cool. I don't know if you guys can see cool little mechanism on the back, and I'm really digging it. So I'm a searcher. I'm always looking for something fresh and new to try and dredge whatever more I can get out of my sound, or my connection to the horn, or to remove the struggle that is sometimes endemic in playing the saxophone. So it's just about the music.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's a couple of new things since the last time I talked to you, which
Yes,
wasn't
I
that
know.
long ago.
No.
Yeah, the thing on the neck, the bridge thing. I've never seen that before. Who turned you on to that?
That's something I had not seen before either. And I was following a classical saxophonist. She lives in Germany. Her name is Asia Fatiava, I believe is how it's pronounced. Amazing player. Just the algorithm showed it to me one day, and I started following her because she's such a beautiful sound and incredible facility in the horn. And she plays, concerts, classical concerts. Anyway, I just noticed on her soprano, and I wrote her out of the blue. She doesn't know who I am, I'm sure. I said, "What's that thing on your horn?" And she wrote me back and told me and sent me the link, and so I bought it, and I like it. I put one on my soprano too.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, tell us about the soprano, and is it the tenor or the soprano? It's a new addition.
This is the newest horn, although they're both new-ish. I think I probably had the tenor for a couple years before I got the soprano, and I got the soprano maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. I was on the road. I was playing a Yamaha at the time. I had played a Busher for many, many years. I always loved that sort of old school sound. Never found a Mark VI soprano that I felt comfortable playing or that, really did it for me. But I bought a modern horn because I wanted the keyboard to be a little easier to play. But then I saw Roberto's Winds posted this online, and Tom Troncon was playing it. In fact, I think he did one of his tone tests videos where he played a few different horns and with the same mouthpiece and setup, and this one really sang. So when I was in New York, I went by the shop with my Yamaha and I tried this horn and I ended up buying it that day, leaving the Yamaha there with them, and they shipped it home for me. And I took this on the bus with me on the rest of our tour that we were on, and I've just fallen in love with it.
Wow.
I'll play a
Yeah.
little bit of this one.
Well, when you know, you know. You know. Amazing. Let's move on from the setup, and let's talk about some of your early influences. Was there a moment in which you heard something or experienced something musically that said, "Hey, this is what I want to do"?
I always loved music when I was a kid. Different kinds of music. I listened to pop radio all the time. I picked up a clarinet in third grade just because everybody back in those days would learn how to play an instrument. I wanted a trumpet, I believe, and all they had at the store were clarinets, and I took one home. A couple years later, there were a lot of clarinets in the band, and the teacher leaned on me to switch to saxophone. Um, and I resisted at first because it was a much heavier case I was going to have to carry around. But they gave me an alto, and as soon as I picked it up, I started to love it. I just loved it. I remember learning Burt Bacharach songs or Herb Alpert songs. And as I got older and I was listening to the radio, this was in the 70s, you could hear a lot of R&B music had tremendous saxophones in them, and bands like Chicago were around, with horn sections. And so I just started to get really excited about music. And then fusion started happening. I remember very vividly hearing Mr. Magic for the first time in high school, in my first year in high school in 1975. And I think that was really the first time I heard some music that, really fired me up because it was like the R&B groove that I loved with the saxophone that I also loved because I was not a bebop fan at a young age. It just didn't float my boat. So I was fortunate to be sort of coming up and getting into music at a time when there was a lot of music that appealed to me. R&B music that had a jazzy influence, jazz music that had an R&B influence. And that's pretty much the tradition that I'm continuing to work in today.
And that kind of leads into some of those early bands that you were a part of. And I guess as I understand it, there was a stretch of time that it took you to kind of get into a status and where you were the band leader.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was in high school, I was playing in a fusion band called Line One, and we were determined to get a record deal, and that's what I did for the first few years, even after I graduated from college. I was delivering pizzas and trying to get a record deal with this band, and then the band broke up, and I was just, pretty aimless. And I heard that Morris Day was putting a band together right after the time broke up, and he needed a keyboard player. So I played a little keyboards because I was already writing songs. Um, and I learned Jungle Love and The Bird, and went and auditioned, and then they hired me to do that, and I convinced them I could really play saxophone as well. So that started my 7 year or so career of working as a sideman with various bands as a keyboard sax player guy who, I could do a few things. Um, and I played with the Isley Brothers and Randy Crawford and, you know, huge Sheena Easton and Tina Marie and Bobby Caldwell at the end, and a lot of different gigs, and sort of learned, paid my dues.
And as I understand it, during that audition process, um, what do you think is what won you the audition, so to speak?
On that very first gig,
Yeah, for
I
the
think they liked the way I looked. I think they liked my vibe. I always did enjoy sort of dancing around on stage. When I hear music, I come alive, and I think they noticed that. And I guess that's what it was. And also I had a groove, I think. Apparently I could play the keyboards in the way they wanted them to be played. And I was a good sort of second keyboard player. I would learn your parts and play them faithfully, and I have a good pocket, and I was responsible. So I didn't know, but I was not happy as a sideman at all. I really, it was not for me. I really wanted to start do my own thing, and I wanted to play more saxophone. And so towards the end of it, I was pretty miserable and really very much looking towards trying to get my own music out there, and that took a few years to make happen.
uh, tell us tell us the story of how you became to be known as Boney James.
Well, that actually started relatively early on in my career. It was, I think, 1986. It was my second gig or third gig. I played with Morris, and then I got a gig with Ray Parker Jr., and then I got this gig with Randy Crawford. And it was a really fantastic band. Tony Maiden from Rufus was playing guitar, and Wayne Lindsay was the keyboard player, a bass player named Sekou Bunch. Ron Bruner Sr. was playing drums at the time. Um, and Randy at the time was very popular in Scandinavia. So we were over in Norway and Sweden, places like that, for long periods of time, and getting a small per diem for expenses. And I said to Wayne Lindsay one day walking down the street, man, everything costs a fortune. I'm just going to have to not eat for a couple days, just making a joke. And he said, oh, you'll get all skinny. I'll have to start calling you Boney James or something. And I said, please don't do that. And just to mess with me, the rest of them, they all started calling me that, and it spread. So there was a whole segment of musicians who knew me through these cats and thought that was my name. So next thing you know, you got a nickname. And when my record came out, my then producer, Paul Brown, called Paul Jackson Jr. up to play on the record, my first record, Trust, and said, come do this Jim Oppenheim gig. And he said, oh, Jim Oppenheim, you mean Boney James? And then the record company got wind of it, and that's how it ended up coming out under that name for my record. So I sort of had two identities for the number of years there.
That's amazing. But that's the way, in speaking of the tradition of jazz, really, that's the way you get your nickname is
Yeah.
somebody's got to give it to you, and it sticks.
Yeah, like Sting, for instance. I heard he used to have a sweater that made him look like a bee, and his friends made fun of him, calling him Sting, and that worked out for him. So same thing with me.
Oh,
Although now I
wow.
have to try not to be Pudgy James. I'm as I get older, it's harder having this nickname.
Yeah, when I first went to college, I started at North Texas, and my roommate started calling me JP, and then he introduced me to everybody as JP, and nobody knew my real name. And I didn't like the JP at all, but I was stuck with it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, I got used to it, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, it definitely turned out well for you.
Turned out okay.
Before we keep going, I want to mention something that can help you organize your practice and really connect the dots. It's called the Modern Pentatonics Crash Course. Unlock modern jazz sounds with 5 notes. This 95-page workbook is packed with detailed exercises, visual diagrams, key insights, and transpositions for every horn. And the best part, each of the 5 sections comes with its own video lesson where I demonstrate the concepts in real time so you can hear and see exactly how they work. It's designed as a companion to the lessons on my Next Level Sax YouTube channel, but it goes much deeper with in-depth analysis, breakdowns, and exclusive exercises you won't find anywhere else. And honestly, for the amount of content you're getting, 95 pages plus video lessons, it's now available for an incredible value. So if you're ready to bring fresh colors and modern lines into your solos, grab your copy of the Modern Pentatonics Crash Course today. You'll be amazed at what 5 notes can do.
Let's talk about touring life. You've got such a rich, long history on the road, touring all over the world. I want to talk a little bit about some of the, practice elements, saxophone-specific type stuff, but also some of the mental game involved. One thing that I always notice when you're on tour, or when I watch somebody, especially a sax player on tour, I always wonder how they keep in tune so consistently if they leave their horn on the stage with all the varying temperatures, and then they just walk up and they pick it up and they just start playing, and if they're a good player, it's in tune. Is there anything that you do to kind of mitigate the opportunity to be out of tune or to be in tune?
Oh yeah, well, it's very important to be in tune. And temperature is extremely problematic at times, especially if it's a very hot outdoor festival or a very chilly air-conditioned indoor venue. So my MO is, I've got my tuner app in my phone, little app in my phone, and I generally will tune the horn at soundcheck on stage. If it's in a theater where it's going to be that temperature when I hit the stage. And then I will leave it just set that way, and hopefully I don't have to make any adjustments. Sometimes when bodies get in, it might warm up a little bit, and every now and then you might have to push in or pull out a little bit. But I find that, I keep an eye on the temperature. I ask my tour manager, how is it? Is it like it was at soundcheck? Or I'll poke my head out there and just see. And then if I need to, I'll put the horn in the wings, and tune it up again before I hit the stage so that it's acclimated and as close as it can be. If I'm playing outside in a festival, you can't really tune up in the daytime. If you're playing at night, it's going to be completely different. So I will, if our dressing room at a festival quite often is a trailer of some kind, I'll put the horn outside on the grass a few minutes before it's time to hit the stage and let it acclimate to the temperature and then tune it up. And then when I hit the stage, it's where it's supposed to be.
And I believe that you like to be at the venues and have that experience for, an extended period of time well
Yes.
before the gig.
Yeah, that's my happy place to be at the gig. Many times after sound check, the band and the crew will go out. They all eat in between sound check and the gig. I can't eat before the show. So I just tend to stay there, and I don't feel like I need to ride in a van, back to the hotel. Because to me, especially if it's a nice enough dressing room, I might as well just stay at the gig and chill. And that's what I tend to do. If I have a decent dressing room, I like to just be at the gig. That's where I like to be. The horn is there. There's a snack if I need it. I can take a nap. I've got my own space as the artist. So that's one of the cool things. That's a perk.
And when it comes to being on the road, what is the practice preparation kind of look like in that setting?
If I don't have a day off, I don't really hit my practice schedule like I do at home. To me, I'm going to get it out at the gig. Um, and I've really gotten into the habit now of trying to pick out as many reads as I possibly can that I feel like are already, solid reads, and I put them in read cases. So hopefully I'll hit the road with, depending how many shows we have. Like we've got 5 weeks of shows coming up. I'm not going to be able to have enough reads for all of that. But I'm going to come out with 10 or 20 reads, so I don't even have to look for reads. I don't need to really practice. I just need to make sure that the reed that I thought I was going to play is going to work in the environment where I am, because oftentimes that changes. But find a reed and play the sound check, usually an hour or so at sound check there's playing, so my embouchure gets warmed up, and then I might take a nap. And then half hour before the show, I will warm up. But I'm not like shedding for hours like I am when I'm at home because I'm sort of saving it for the gig.
And how do you find a reed? Speaking of reeds, is there anything that you do in particular that's like a routine of some sort?
Yeah, well, I've gotten in the habit. I mean, I used to be, Manny told you, I'm sure, but I used to be terrible with reeds. Until I got this new setup, I would struggle quite often with finding a good reed and have to go through boxes and boxes and boxes, and occasionally find a reed that I loved and or I could make a record with or play a show, and oftentimes those would last for one particular day or something. My new setup is a lot friendlier. So, but I do, on certain days, I'll just go through a few boxes of reeds, and if I find a reed I like, I'll put it in one reed case. If I find a reed I think might grow with some playing, I'll put it in another reed case. And then when I get reeds that I feel like are super solid, I will save those for gigs or recording and practice with a less fantastic reed just for shedding. So yeah, a good reed is very precious, and I try and make sure I've always got some in the queue. Then I'll rotate them. But I'm not like a soaking kind of guy. I'm not like a working it kind of guy. For me, just a slightly moistened in my mouth, and then I'll know pretty early on in a playing session if it's going to work or not. And luckily, I'm finding a lot more good reads these days.
And how do you store the reeds? Because I find that like if I, crack open a reed, case or a box of reeds, and I play on them, I soak them, I play them, I say, okay, that's a great reed, I want to keep that. I put it back in the reed case that it came in. That's what I typically do. But then, it just dries out, and then inevitably a week or two later, it's just like a completely different playing reed. Is there anything that you do?
I carry my reeds around in these things. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
It's glass and it's got felt, and it's a really great case. I got this one from Boston Sax. And so I have two of these, so I can probably, get like 20 good tenor reeds. And I have a similar one for my sopranos. And they stay nice and flat and dry, which is how I like them. They don't warp at all. So I recommend this. But this works for me.
And you don't find any kind of molding issue? I always run into
Well,
that
I always
if I have
dry. I dry the reed off before I put it away. Try and remove as much moisture as I can, because you don't want it to be moldy. I tend to try and clean out my mouthpiece as soon as I'm done. Try and keep all the fungus at bay.
Yeah, I remember a time when that used to be like not a bad thing. People would be like, "Oh yeah, that's extra. It's a good thing." And not
I
so
never
much.
leave the reed on the mouthpiece. I always have it super flat and dry, and that seems to work better for me in terms of making sure that they're going to be where I expected them to be when I take them out to play them again. But like I said, with my new setup, I'm finding I can get a few gigs out of each reed, and if I'm practicing, I can play the same reed for a week or so, or it's good to rotate, and then I can have 5 or 6 good ones, and then they last quite a lot longer.
Yeah, I remember I've been going to, the same repair shop for over a decade, and whenever there would be a huge bag of reeds, like a shopping bag full of reeds, uh, Manny would be like, "Oh yeah, these are for Boney."
Yeah. I mean, I still buy a lot of reeds, because I play I'm always gigging, and I like to have them here, and I like to know that I have them when I need them. But I'm not going through them as quickly as I used to, and I'm finding a lot more ones that are playable and that are fun to play with this new setup. Like I said, I know David Sanborn was also, very notorious for being tough tough to, going through lots of reads. But that's one of the great aspects of having the career that I have, is that I can afford it, and it's a write-off. And I don't have to worry about, playing the same reed for ever and ever, or playing a reed that doesn't work for me. It's part of my job to find a good reed, so I take the time and spend the money to make sure that I have one.
Have you tried any of the synthetic reeds and thought about that?
Yeah, I try everything if I can. I like to try new things. And if they made one that felt good to me, that I could just consistently play and not have to worry about it, I would totally do it. But they don't work for me. They don't sound right to my ear. They don't feel right to my lip, and they're just not right. For many, many years when I was younger, I played plastic cover. My first few records I made with plastic cover, but when I listen to those now, they sound a little bright and thin to me. My concept of my sound has changed over the years. So I think it still sounds like me, but I am hopefully, edging more towards fatter and warmer. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, and speaking of like, playing on an auto link now, which obviously has like zero baffle at all in it, and
Yeah.
to be able to get your sound on it means that internally you're doing what it takes to make that
Yeah,
happen.
it doesn't sound too dark to me, but doesn't sound too bright. Some of my other mouthpieces, I played Gardala for a long time, um, and then I played a bunch of new design mouthpieces, all really great pieces. The West Coast Sax I played for a long time. I was playing the 10M fan. He makes fantastic mouthpieces. Some of them with, baffles, but they still sounded great. But I'm finding with this mouthpiece, for whatever reason, I can put a little more air into it and not have to fight the mid-range sound. And I'm having a lot easier time getting up to the altissimo than I was on those other mouthpieces for whatever reason. So I think this one just fits me better.
And where did you find that mouthpiece?
Strangely enough, Mark Sepenuk, the 10M fan guy, put it up for sale on Facebook. And I said, "Oh, I'd like to try that." And he said, "Oh man, if you start playing this instead of my mouthpiece," because I was playing his mouthpiece at the time, he said, "I'm never talking to you again." Just kidding. But he sent it to me, and I bought it, and I fell in love with it. And I pull his out every now and then, just to make sure I'm doing the right thing, because I loved his mouthpiece. I made the last record with it, but this one is still floating my boat.
Yeah. So,
Sorry about the helicopter. I think that there's this.
oh, I don't hear it.
Oh, cool.
I live by the airport, so it's like a constant battle. So, uh, when it comes to practicing when you're not on the road, are there a couple of key things that you try to, consistently hit?
Well, sure. I mean, practicing is such a huge part of my life, and there's always something to learn. I think I go back and forth between thinking about my tone or thinking about pitch, or keeping my fingers nimble, um, trying to stretch my knowledge of things. If I hear something sometimes somebody else did, I'll say, "What is that?" And I'll transcribe it. I don't write it down, but I'll learn something, and then I'll try and learn it in all keys. And then, you know, whether or not I use it or not, it's just good for my brain to keep stretching things. And I find as I've gotten older and I'm more facility with the horn, that I can do things that I couldn't do when I was younger, when I was really just learning. So I'm trying to keep that learning mindset. So it's either like long tones for tone and pitch, keeping my throat open and my sound big and even, working on altissimo, which is something I find I can do a lot easier now. So now that I can get up there, I have to learn, the technique of getting around up there, and new ideas and all keys, or, and then sometimes I have to spend time writing new melodies. I mean, it's a constant seesaw of things that I'm working on and thinking about. So it's not so much a regimen like when I was a kid. It's a little more free flowing, but I sort of just trust myself to know where it is I need to go on a given day. But I'm out here every day.
Do you remember the last thing you transcribed? What that was?
Um, well, I was working on on St. Thomas for a while because I always loved it, but when I was a kid, I never learned what Sonny Rollins did. There was a Sonny Stitt thing that I spent a lot of time memorizing called Sunnyside, which was kind of like a rhythm changes thing. I'll play a little bit of that. I forgot it.
That's always how it goes. That's always
I
how it goes.
forgot it.